Welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Daniel Sanford. I'm the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning. I've been on the job for 3 weeks. I'm quite new, so this panel was sort of a nice opportunity for me to cheat and get to know a little bit about what's happening on the faculty here and some of the practices happening. If I haven't had the chance to meet you yet, I'm really looking forward to doing so. We're here as we begin the new academic year to take a moment to think about what we learned last year. Dr. Trump said something during this morning's address that I loved, which is that during the last year, we learned things that made us a better university. So we're here to consider, what did we learn? And in the context of the heart of what a university does, classroom teaching, how have we become better? What did we learn from this experience? We've been through this incredible period of change as an unprecedented crisis has forced to thoroughly rethink how we do things, how we communicate with students, how we think about equity in the context of remote learning, how we implement active learning in remote and hybrid courses. We've all made heavy use of tools and approaches that may have been totally foreign to us 18 months ago. So now the goal today is to pause and to consider, as we head into a new year, what worked, what didn't work, what are the things that we thought would work, based on what we knew of remote pedagogy heading into the pandemic that perhaps didn't pan out the way we expected them to. What were some of our bright shining spots in pedagogy that really landed with our students? In the way that we approach our role as educators, what did we learn from the last year that will affect the way that we teach going forward? And what approaches have we used that we want to keep in our tool belt as educators? I want to take a moment to acknowledge kind of the shifting context of this panel. We started planning this session just a few weeks ago, in a moment just a few weeks ago, where it felt like we were perhaps heading into more of a normal academic year. It's already clear in the few weeks since then that we're not coming out of the pandemic as quickly as we all had hoped. So, which means that, yes, we're thinking today about applying what we've learned from pandemic teaching to a new and better normal that we'll build together. But also, we're continuing to think about teaching in the context of continued hybrid courses, continued distancing, and continued public safety measures. So, parsing out the difference between those two things as we head into this year is something we'll explore over the next 90 minutes. Thank you to all of our panelists who are joining us today. 6 members of the Boise State faculty, outstanding educators from across the institution, who each rose to the challenge of COVID teaching in different ways, who will be sharing their thoughts with us. So what I'll do here is I'll ask each of you on the panel to briefly introduce yourself, please. I've placed everyone's names over in the chat if you'd like to follow along, and panelists, that also gives you an order you can use in introducing yourself. Liliana, would you lead us off?
Yes, so my name is Liliana Bobin-Kostova. I'm a professor in the math department.
My name is Derek Anong, and I'm in the music department, and I'm applied classical trumpet faculty. I run our jazz area. I do music technology, and I run the jazz festival. Nice to meet everybody.
I'm Tracy Lee, and I teach in the College of Business and Economics in the Information Technology Management and Supply Chain Management Department. I teach business statistics, our 2-course sequence, and I also teach principles of supply chain management. Those are classes that all business majors are required to take. And so I have the joy of teaching all required core business classes.
I'm Jaz Paudel. I am an assistant professor of economics. Like Tracy, I'm also in the Kobe department of Kobe building. I teach both grad and undergrad level courses. For the last year and a half, I've taught one grad level economic theory course and a couple of undergrad level environmental econ courses. And I'm looking forward to this engaging conversation, and nice to meet you all here.
My name is Moji Sadeh. I'm an assistant professor in the civil engineering department. My teaching and research is focused on hydrology, water resources, and climate, and data analysis also. So that's what I do.
Hi, all. My name is Lori Watson. I am a clinical associate professor in the School of Social Work, and I teach primarily in our online graduate program, but always always have a few courses on campus. I teach a Social Work 101 class each year, which is a foundation class. And I teach our on-the-ground graduate students every fall. So happy to be here.
Thank you all for joining us. And Teresa, would you care to introduce yourself too?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Foca-Relay. I'm an associate director here in the CTL. And I'll just be taking some notes as we talk today. We're hoping to put together some resources to go along with the kind of follow-up information from this session. So I'll be taking some notes today as you all talk about what you've learned from pandemic teaching.
So the question that I've asked all of our panelists to consider is, as you prepare for the upcoming academic year, what are some of the lessons that you've learned from teaching last year that you'll be applying? Is there anything you tried last year that you plan to keep doing this year? And is there anything you tried last year that you plan to continue doing post-pandemic that's made a permanent change on the way that you're approaching teaching? And we'll go in the same order. Liliana, could you lead us off?
Yes. So maybe I should first say something about my research on teaching, like everyone else did. So that is, so my research is in the area of cryptography and cryptanalysis and game theory. I've been at Boise State since 2003, and I've been teaching both undergraduate and graduate level classes for the past maybe 10 years. I've been teaching only the cryptography classes in the math department, undergraduate and graduate, and we have 5 courses. And just in the fall of 2019, we decided that some of the crypto classes it's good to go online. So it went through this curriculum change request, and the plan was in the fall 2021 to actually start teaching online. And then the pandemic happened. And in the spring of 2020, it was kind of a first experience for me to actually start teaching an online class. So I had undergraduate and graduate level. So the things that I will continue now, I'm only the classes that I'm teaching, they're all going online, regardless of pandemic or not. And the one thing that I always kind of encourage students and feature that teamwork is something that is very valuable. That I try to, when I was teaching the classes on campus, I tried to feature that whether through quizzes or other activities, to feature that interdisciplinary nature, just because the cryptography is interdisciplinary field. And I tried to continue that online. It, the beginning was difficult. Especially because the undergraduate level courses, they have a computational component. And it was challenging to engage the students, especially if the course is in asynchronous mode, to actually succeed in that learning, especially when it comes to the hands-on work in the class and working on a team. But that's one of the things that I will keep doing and improving. And I'm working with eCampus. Actually, the whole summer I worked in developing one of the courses.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Derek.
Sure. So first things first, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Say that all the time, teaching music technology. Anyways, so yeah, I teach our music technology course that we have in the music department. I also teach jazz improvisation. I run the jazz ensemble, and I teach trumpet lessons. And I also teach a couple of other courses when they pop up. But I think on paper, there were a lot of predicted problems with moving online for a performing art degree, and music is the one I'm talking about now. And because music is such a collaborative and together operation and event, and I think a lot of that also has to do with the fact that music is principally taught in groups and principally taught with the goal being a performance of that group. And with the goal of the students actually learning music and being better musicians almost being secondary because of the nature of how music functions administratively and politically within educational systems, and that's for middle school, high school, college, etc. However, I had a really great experience doing things online, contrary to that prediction. And I think that the bottom line is that it almost forced us to unplug from the standard political expectations of what music is supposed to do, which is make a good concert, because we couldn't. And that gave us a lot of freedom to say, okay, well, what are we really here doing? And so I think that on the teacher end of things, we were able to reflect a little bit more on what are we doing and how are we doing and why are we doing it? And also, I think that one of the most powerful things that I injected into my courses was having the students reflect more on what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it and what it's going to be preparing them for. And the changes, the very immediate changes in the performing arts industry, meaning it was zero during the pandemic, really caused everyone, including students, to really look beyond their degree and say, what am I going to do when I'm done? Or what am I preparing myself for now? And so, there was a huge shakeup in music and the performing arts, whether we like it or not. And I think that it showed that technology literacy among students and faculty is an incredible component, and that the students who were not very technologically literate had a terrible time. And those who were, and this goes for faculty too, and those who were literate on some level really were able to sort of figure out how to thrive in certain ways. And so I think that technology literacy is something I'm going to be using in all of my classes, no matter what, and making sure that there's some level of competency and understanding there, even for things as simple as, thinking that your Wi-Fi is the same as your internet. Even something as simple as that can really help improve things. I think that I really enjoyed using Zoom in a lot of ways, simply because it allowed students who would not normally speak in class to say things in the chat. And I think that was, we could have 3 or 4 conversations going on at once that way. And I think that really promoted a lot of equalization in the classroom that way. And also sometimes students can say what they want in writing more clearly than if they're talking in front of their peers. Whereas there are also students who love to talk in front of their peers and are good at it. And so I think that was great. Also, I liked Zoom because I could really, I'm looking at you all here from 2 monitors and a giant computer, and I'm a nerd. And so because of that, I was able to just utilize all of these resources and really maximize what I'm showing and how I'm showing. I have it hooked up to my software and my synthesizer equipment and everything like that. And so I think the students really liked the fact that I could show them so many more things than I could in our computer lab, for example, or even in a classroom. And granted, our teaching technology, I think we're like the next up to be upgraded. We're pretty back in the dark ages in the music building. The other thing that I really liked and I really enjoyed was using more of a project-based learning approach in the classes, rather than a learn this and show that you learned it approach. And so for the jazz ensembles, we produced 3 full-length albums that we all recorded remotely. They all learned how to record, edit, mix, master. And those are all up on our website. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that they did there. And so, yeah, I think that the big things are project-based learning, reflective practice, and really, because we weren't trying to produce a concert, we could really focus on what the students were learning and how they were going to apply that, as opposed to having the overriding operating principle being we must play a good concert. So I think some things that didn't really work, where I'm one of those teachers who says you don't have to come to class if you know what's going on, and everything is due at the end of the semester. And that was a terrible, terrible decision for online learning, because the students basically would push that and say, I'll do that later because I don't have to do it now. And so I think providing a little bit more of a structure for them, in my case, would have helped them out, because in my music tech class, specifically, I have a number of incompletes simply because they didn't have a due date. And so they waited and did the other things that did have due dates. And I think that, there, of course, the traditional learning models of music, of playing and being in an ensemble, are very important, and we definitely missed out on those. But, assuming that the concert isn't the only goal, that's not really the only thing we have to do. So I threw a lot at you all, and it's all music based. So sorry for boring you with my music perspective here, but glad to be here and excited to hear what others have to say.
Derek, were you holding synchronous classes where your students are meeting together over Zoom?
So yes and no. For the jazz ensemble class in the beginning of the semester, we did a number of synchronous classes that I also recorded that were basically explaining the recording process and how to record. And I would do one-on-ones to help students with their individual technology setups. And then towards the middle and end of the semester, it was very asynchronous, and they just had due dates when they had to turn things in or listen to things and reflect or turn in fixes. And then I would always have maybe every other week a time where they could come if they had any sort of an issue. And then towards the end, we would have a few more in person where I realized it wasn't effective to say, listen to our mixes and give me feedback. We had to sit in Zoom, and then I would kick everyone out and say, listen and come back in 3 minutes in order for them to actually listen to it.
That's fascinating. You have unique challenges in performance arts, but stuff we can all learn from. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tracy.
Hi there. Okay, so just to make sure, because I can talk a lot, you want us to answer all 3 of those questions that you posed, or are we just sticking to the first one about lessons learned?
You can think of all of those 3 questions together. It's just
okay. All right. Because that works. All right. So first things first, I'm going to say that one lesson I learned is how critical self-care is in bringing my best self to student interactions. And so some of the things that I learned to do is I set a timer so that I would stretch at least once an hour. Otherwise, I'm 50 and I creak like a rusty hinge. So I would get up and do a couple stretches. Number 2 is that I put exercise on my calendar and I protected it from interruptions. So for me, walking became more doable because I was at home and I didn't have the chance that I would run into 14 people I knew on my way out of the building and never actually get a walk when I'm on campus. Number 3, drink enough water. I track it because I wasn't. And I didn't realize how much exhaustion and sort of feeling fugged, like all fuggy, was because of dehydration. And number 4, take supplements if you need them, which I do. So I take a multivitamin, vitamin B, vitamin D, a B supplement complex, and a probiotic. And it's amazing what a difference that made. So those are my self-care things I learned that I don't know why it took me until I was 50 to learn, but there you go. Next, it is much harder for me to feel a connection with students on a live session when I can't see their faces. On a Zoom call, most mute their cameras, which is fine from a right to do that. But I didn't realize how much of my energy came from seeing their reactions in a classroom. And I was teaching asynchronously. So I took every opportunity to have synchronous meetings with students. I mean, in fall 2020, I actually had one hybrid class. And so students were in the room or they were on Zoom. And because everybody was wearing a mask in the room, it was like they were muted on Zoom because I couldn't get that expression. And so taking every opportunity possible to humanize myself to them and them to me, like having them do Flipgrid videos, whatever, right? Those lessons I learned to help me make a connection to them and be able to picture what their expression was like, even when they were muted on Zoom. Next, I am ready to give up on official office hours because number 1, students need help in the moment, and that does not coincide with my office hours. And they are comfortable emailing or texting me because I put my cell phone in on everything and encourage them and thank them when they do. So I get a lot of emails and texts from students. So I tell them I'll respond within 24 hours just to set an expectation, but I typically respond within 2 hours. So that helped take care of questions, but not everybody can do that. Some people actually have a life, and yeah, but that works for me. And the other reason is that my office hours never seem to fit the schedule for whoever needs to meet. So 90% of the time I'd end up scheduling a time outside my office hours anyway for someone I couldn't help over phone or text. I mean, over email or text. And next, the more that I can make my communication with students two-way, the more they feel engaged in the class and the more they feel that I care about them and their learning. Again, I don't know why it took me so long to really grok that, but I send two emails a week. Just to give you the background, I've been teaching online since 2007. And in fact, when the pandemic shutdown hit, that was the first semester that I was teaching fully online anyway, ever in my teaching career. And so I smugly thought that I would have the least amount of problems because my students were already planning to be online in my class. I wouldn't need to change anything except how we proctored the exams. I mean, boy, was I wrong, right? But I learned some lessons from that semester in and I'm going to go into the next lesson learned, that the digital divide is real. The gap for students who don't have access to campus technology was, I had no idea. It really helped me learn compassion all over again for what students are going through, because they weren't just having their lives disrupted. Many of them didn't have a fast enough internet connection to take the test through the proctoring service we were using. Their webcams didn't work. Their computers, they were sharing one with everybody in their home or with 5 roommates or whatever their situation. They couldn't have privacy to do their work. It was, I didn't know. And so I ended up making some policy changes so that I was, I'm a rule bound person. So I felt like I needed to make a policy change for the whole class so that it was fair and not me just offering a favoritism, which helped me to create a little bit more compassionate syllabus overall, I think. But returning to the communicating two ways, I send 2 emails a week to my class, and I've done that forever. The first one is, here's what's happening this week. And I'll usually include a, hey, this is a fun YouTube video or whatever. I started adding a question in those or a survey in those. So I would ask, what struck you, what have you noticed the most in your daily life that applied to what we learned? Or I would include a survey and say, hey, take this quick 90-second survey. And I want to share the results with the class on what our experience has been with blah, shortages, whatever. And I saw a really big increase on my evaluation of the kind of comments like, Tracy really cares about us, or I felt like she was interested in what I thought. So I have to credit it to actually trying to make communication two-way. And then every week, one of my emails, it has the what's due this week, which I do that because it calms my anxiety. I'm a aggressively maternal person. And so I get very anxious if I haven't told people what I expect of them, like on a day-to-day basis. So I would include what's due this week. And I got so many comments and emails from students that they appreciated that. And finally, I understood why, because if they're taking 5 classes, every class has things due on different days. Not everything was showing up on the Blackboard calendar. Even though it was in my schedule and syllabus, they didn't want to have to keep looking at the syllabus. And so they found it very comforting that I sent an email every week and they could just open that email and then put things into their planner to get them done and know that I was the one telling them this is what's due. So I have a lot of colleagues who think I am way too mom-like in that, but it calms my anxiety, and enough of them commented positively. So I'm going to keep doing that, as I have been doing that for the last, I don't know how many years, but I just got more comments from people about it this last time. Okay, and final lesson learned before I get on to a couple of things I tried. Wearing glasses while using extra lighting so I don't look like a hag on videos is a real challenge, because the problem is real, and I don't know how YouTubers do it. I mean, I can't not wear glasses, or I can't read anything or see their faces or whatever. And I just haven't found a good solution for that. I've tried lights all over the place, and yes, you can see the glare. That was just a little lighthearted, but it's real, because, having to struggle with the tools you're using. that's not the only struggle, but it's a funny one. All right, so two things that I did, well, I'll just stick with one because I've talked for a long time now. We have these COBE teaching brown bags that happen twice a month, and they often will bring in a guest speaker or have a panel or something. And one was from Serena Hicks and the College of Education. And oh my gosh, it just really struck me. She talked about how sick she was, how it was killing her to do discussion boards, just the sameness of it, the roteness, the lack of imagination, or, she's like, it was killing my soul to read all these discussion boards, and it's so much grading. So she created these interactive notebooks in Google using Google Slides, and she shared a copy of it with us. And I was really struck by this because I do get comments from students about boring discussion boards. So on the one hand, I have to make my discussion board questions as interesting and lived experience connecting with content as possible, because that's one way to keep them from being boring. But that I have to respond to 3 people part of it really gets to some people, especially when you're doing it week after week. So I adapted her interactive notebook and did a pilot study with 10 students I recruited, and said, if you do this, it'll replace a missed assignment you had. And they loved it. And I did alternate modes than just writing. So for example, I had them put together a Pinterest board of images and quotes that of what the most important messages from studying project management means to them. Or I had them actually take 3 pictures from the internet and that were products that they've used, and talk about what kind of process was used to produce them, so that it made a visual connection between what we've been studying for terminology. And they had to think about it. Like, they had to think and justify why they said that. So they take a picture of a t-shirt and a picture of a high volume tennis shoe and a picture of a bakery muffin or whatever. And they would talk about the different environments in which those were produced. So I had not just that, but the other, I promise is the last thing, is the element of choice. So when I put that interactive notebook together, I gave them the option to respond to there were up to 3 prompts per topic, and they could choose which one to respond to. And I asked them to give me feedback on why they chose the one they did, so that I could understand what appealed to them about it. It was really amazing. Every time I offered choice in my classes and explained the goal of the activity, so this is why I'm offering you the choice, it fulfills this same learning objective. And so just doing it in that interactive notebook was so amazingly effective that I started offering choice in other things as well. And I also credit that to, students saying that they thought I cared. I do care, but they thought I cared, right? Okay, so that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Tracy. So much great stuff there. Thanks for highlighting self-care, which is, I know we all have been, especially over the last year, giving that message to our students, how important self-care is. And thank you for highlighting for us how important that is as well. Jayash.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. And great to hear a lot of inputs from all the previous panelists. Since Tracy was the last speaker, and I happen to be an applied microeconomist, so I always get excited when someone talks about choices, right? More choices are always better. That's one of the things I teach. But anyway, happy to be here. I will focus on 3 things that I learned during the pandemic. First and foremost, I know when both Liliana and Derek talked about their learning experiences, technology came in. So a few things that really worked out for me. I taught 1 asynchronous online course and 2 synchronous courses through Zoom, and students really appreciated weekly consultation hours on Zoom. For those of students who were taking an asynchronous online course, they told me that they really enjoyed getting to know the instructor better, and it also helped them master some of the learning outcomes. Since Brian is also here, I must say, give a shout out to Brian. He helped me with getting access to an iPad, and when I'm teaching a math intensive econ course, making sure, dynamic learning is happening when I'm kind of drawing the graphs. That was really helpful, and students appreciated that a lot. And the third technology specific thing that I remember worked out really well for me, something that Derek also mentioned in his music class, is the idea of project-based learning. And I think that's where having these breakout room sessions as well as optional consultation hours on Zoom work really well for me to get to know students a little bit better and also understand what problems they're encountering as they were learning new things. So that's the first thing I learned during the pandemic. The second thing I would like to highlight here is the role of teaching innovation. And in this case, the role of transparent assignments in my course worked really well for me. Basically, for those of you who may not be familiar with transparent assignments, essentially when I created assignments, I included explicit explanation of what the primary purpose of the assignment is, what the task entails, and what's the criteria that I'll be using to evaluate their work. And this turned out to be very important because of the nature of the class, which was mostly asynchronous or synchronous through Zoom. For example, if I were asking my students to do a cost-benefit analysis of cleaning and restoring the Boise River, the assignment would explicitly ask them to present a carefully reasoned economic argument, either by means of graph or numerical illustration, and also give them an opportunity to relate some of the principles that were taught in the class to real-world environmental problems. And here I would like to specify that when students were provided with rubrics or checklists that was eventually used to evaluate their work, I think students responded positively to the application of transparent assignment. And I think that's something I would like to continue doing this year as well as post-pandemic. And the final thing that I learned that I would like to focus on here is the importance of conducting situational factors analysis. This is something that's promoted a lot when we're thinking about course design. And maybe it's my third year of teaching full-time here at Boise. Maybe I wasn't aware of that prior to coming here. I must say I benefited a lot. And so this factor analysis focuses on 5 specific questions, but among those 5 specific questions, one of the question is essentially investigating the life situation of the learners, prior knowledge among students, and their expectations and their preferred learning styles. Now, this seems basic and straightforward, but when one does a survey at the beginning of the course, it gives a whole enriching knowledge on the distribution of the students that are taking the class. Initially, I thought, well, this is the prerequisite for the course, so I should assume that students will have background in X, Y, and Z, but then I learned that that's not necessarily the case. So understanding that where that variation comes from really helped me understand what students are really looking for. And I think this also ties well with one of the other points that was raised by Derek, I think, or someone else in the panel, the need for reflective practices among students, right? And so when students are tasked with different assignments, even as an instructor, I get to reflect why I'm assigning certain assignments. And then when students complete their assignments, they also get to connect why we're learning what we're learning and how that fits with the real world setting. So I would specify that the situational factor analysis is something I'm gonna think a little bit more in every course I'll be teaching, not only this year as well as post-pandemic. So those were 3 things that I learned during the pandemic, and I hope to continue.
Thank you so much. I love your use of rubrics and transparent assignments, and I love that framing of the use of rubrics. Moji.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all panelists for sharing all this great information. I guess I'll have to repeat some of the information that's already shared because great experiences are there. And mine is similar to many of other panelists. Unfortunately, with going online, the The adverse part of it was that I lost the joy of connecting to the students and get that energy in class. I don't necessarily get that through Zoom, but there are also positive things about it, and students appreciate that lectures are recorded and posted. So, you know, we have a lot of students that are non-traditional, so they work during the day, they might not be able to attend the class, but now with the recording and everything, they can go back and access the same material. So that offers a positive aspect to all the changes that we have seen. And I guess this is something that I'm going to continue to do regardless of whether we go online or we go in person or online, is that I'm going to record all sessions and post them so that students can reach or can get the same material regardless of whether they're able to attend the class or not. As many of the other panelists said, that connection between the instructor and students is super important. I don't necessarily have the answer of how to make that connection. I tried many different ways, and it worked better when it was in person. But I guess just explaining to the students that why this is important, you know, getting them involved in class, communicate with them that I care to know you, so I would really appreciate if you share videos when you ask a question, things like that. Just communicate with them that I want to know you. That has helped a lot. There are some students that don't engage, and I don't know how to go around that. But with most students, I have been successful in connecting with. One thing that I learned, I guess the hard way, was not everything that is literature-based necessarily will work in my classroom. Like, you know, I've heard a lot about discussion boards, and they're great. So I use discussion board as a method of evaluating participation in class. So what I expected of my students was, hey, what I expect of you is post one comment, respond to a question, post a question, do something meaningful in the discussion board. And toward the end of the semester, I learned that it gave students a lot of anxiety that they have to do this. Some of them are more introverts, some of them are more extroverts. So it's, you know, it didn't really work for everyone. So I had to drop that entire credit evaluation and give them all the credit of participation, because I was losing some of my students because of that necessity of participation in discussion board. But discussion board was a great tool. What I'm saying is, we need, what I learned was to diversify the methods of participation. It doesn't necessarily have to be discussion board. It can be many other things. But through the discussion board, similar to the experience that Tracy was sharing, there was one student who was really good at posting all the expected deliverables each week. So I didn't have to do it. Another student took the lead on this, and basically that was very nice. One other thing that I want to share with you is proctoring service. I never use the proctoring service, and I don't think that I will ever use that. What I do instead is I communicate with my students early on and consistently and continuously of why are we here, right? So do you want to get a grade and go on, or do you want to learn something? I try to communicate that with them, and through diversifying the modes of examination, grading, and everything else, I try to get this pressure of grade off of the students and turn this into a learning focused environment. And I am not going to say that's going to work 100% for every single class for all students, but it has been a positive experience for me. So I see the positive side of this outweighs the negative side. So I'll continue to do that. And I liked what other panelists said about setting that expectation that I'm always here for you. Shoot me an email. I'll be back to you as soon as I can, but no later than 24 hours. And I set the expectation that weekend is not going to count, but I always respond to the students in the weekend too, unless I'm not available. But I set the expectation that weekend doesn't count. So I will respond to your email within 24 hours. So that I think that helps. And I also dropped the office hours, because when the classes were in person, I wouldn't get too many students in my office hours anyway, but I'm getting a lot of more emails from the students. So basically moving from that in-person office hour to email worked out. And also a lot of students answered each other's questions through the discussion board too. So discussion board, again, it will remain an important aspect of my teaching, but there are, putting a requirement on it, I will drop that. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share my experience.
Thank you so much, Moji. And you're mentioning something that I've heard a lot from so many people, which is that discussion boards, which are sort of like the bread and butter of online teaching. Like I've heard very few stories from during the pandemic of people saying, yes, this was the pillar of my online course and I loved it. And a lot of innovation there. So thank you so much. Lori.
So as I was thinking about this, I had a timely merging of a couple of events in spring of 2020. Primarily, I participated in Tasha Souza's Inclusive Excellence Faculty Learning Community in that semester. So I was really thinking about and trying to be better about inclusive teaching practices. And then suddenly we all are forced to be distant and people are feeling lost and not connecting. And so I really felt lucky that I had those ideas and strategies kind of brewing when we were forced online, especially for the class that had been in person. Most of my teaching I was doing online anyway, which was also just really fortunate. So I had some experience that I could bring over. But the class I was teaching when the pandemic hit was a foundations class. So a lot of first year students, a lot of first generation students, right? A lot of students who already are having that struggle to feel connected and to feel like they're a part of the university or that they belong in a university setting. And then we had the added challenge of COVID. So as I was thinking about this, I think a lot of what I wanted to share was the ways I tried to help build that sense of belonging and connection, especially for my students in this foundation class who were maybe struggling with that already. And these are things that I have since, I teach year round, I teach summer classes for our online program in the summer, and I've done this every semester since now, and I don't see myself stopping doing a few specific things that I found to be really effective. And some people have touched on these, but one thing that I have started to do with every class is I always do a pre-course survey now, always. And I try to intentionally do it early. So the classes I'm starting next week, I've already sent my syllabus and pre-course survey out to the students who are going to be in that class. I do that partly because it gives me some lead time to start connecting before class even begins. So as student responses come in, I write back to every single student a personalized email, which some people think, oh my goodness, you are crazy. I can't possibly do that. But if you chip away at it and if you start early, you really can. And I think it pays off tremendously. And I can't remember who mentioned the two-way communication, but that's the other thing I've found that this helps open up for me is when I respond to a student, I very intentionally always ask them at least one or two questions, because then they feel compelled to write back to me. And then I hope and know that they'll feel comfortable reaching out when they're struggling or as the semester carries on. And I'm really, really almost over the top in my invitation to do that, right? I want to support you. here I am. And this has proved really valuable with my graduate students too, right? Like just this week, I teach one of the first classes in our graduate program. So I have students who are coming back to university after 10 years out, right? And they are nervous and they are scared. And so to have that opportunity to express those fears in the survey, to hear, oh, hey, there's this resource, you know, some of my replies to their surveys are, oh, do you know about this resource we have for you? You might want to look into that ahead of time, right? Or don't hesitate to reach out if you hit bumps in the road as we get started, right? That's my job. That's what I'm here for. Please, please rely on me. So that is something, it's, you know, it's definitely a front end effort, but I feel like it has paid off huge dividends in terms of my students feeling supported. And often I'll have students say, I have never had a professor email me personally, right? They're sort of like, whoa, I didn't know that could even happen. So it feels, they feel important, right? And they feel like I care about who they are. And specifically, especially the last year, I have a question on my survey, which I'm happy to share. I actually have it set up so that it can be just copied if folks want to use it. I'll put it in the chat. But I asked specifically, you know, have you been impacted by COVID, or are there other stressors in your life that you're worried are going to interfere with your success? So they can kind of put that out there early. They don't have to be the one bringing it up to me. I'm asking about it. So that's really helpful, right? The other thing I did during COVID, and I'm going to try to do, and this again is, there's some tracking involved, especially if you have a big class. But what I started doing is if students didn't show up, I'll fix that, Jenna, thank you. If they missed 2 classes in a row, I sent them an email and just checking in, right? Hey, I noticed you were in class this week, or you missed Thursday and Tuesday. Want to make sure you're okay. And it was amazing what I found out, right? Like my assumptions that I made about students before I started doing this, and I'm a social worker, right? I shouldn't make assumptions like this, but you know, I would assume they were blowing it off or they didn't care, right? And when I started asking, you know, there was a student who had had a mental health crisis. There was a student who missed classes because it was the first year anniversary of her father's death, right? Like there were legitimate reasons people weren't in class. And the fact that I asked and expressed concern rather than being on their case about it, you've had 3 absences, what the heck's going on? You're not going to be able to do well in class, really made a difference. And I think helped students feel comfortable letting me know when tough stuff was happening. And there was a lot of tough stuff happening last year, right? So the email check-ins was definitely helpful. I also, and a lot of this came out of the Inclusive Excellence faculty learning community, I have really pushed myself to offer more flexibility and to also, especially with major assignments, always give students the opportunity to do a do-over and do better. So for heavy weighted major assignments, I always tell students, look, if you're not happy with this grade, you can do it again and you can improve your score. And I've struggled with that because I also want to encourage people to submit quality work the first go around, right? And not just count on the do-over with all that helpful feedback. So what I do is I average their first score and their revised score if it's a major assignment that they choose to dig in and work on to improve. And students, again, really appreciate that. I think sometimes students feel like, okay, I got all this feedback, but I don't have the opportunity to actually apply it. Not as helpful as it would be if I, you know, without that opportunity for a do-over. So that's another thing that I intend to keep doing and did more of. I even just offering a grace period of a day and calling it that, students feel like, oh, you're so generous, right? And for me, didn't matter, right? Like we have Saturday deadlines in our program and I don't want to grade all day Sunday. So I've just said to my students, you've got a 24-hour grace period for all the Saturday deadlines, and they love that, right? And some of them stick to Saturday and don't want to take more time, and some do, but just that little communication of a willingness to be flexible, I think really helps them. Let's see, what else? The other thing I do is to just try to let them know that I care about their life outside of the classroom. And some of the ways I did that with my foundation students, I actually early in the semester in the spring of 2020 just took 20 minutes in class we just did kind of a mini lecture and discussion about what you need to do to take care of yourself to be in a good position to learn. And it was things like some of the stuff Tracy talked about with self-care, right? Like you got to drink water, people, and you need to sleep. And I actually had them do a little survey to kind of assess themselves, like, am I sleeping 6 to 8 hours a night? Da, da, da. And then after that data came in, and we had talked about it a little bit, I put some resources in the Blackboard course site and just went through it one day, right? Like we have a health center on campus. Here's a resource for first generation students. Here's the TRIO program. Here's a program for veterans. And that a lot of students really appreciated that and told me, I found this program on campus that I didn't know existed because you had the link and you told us about it. And it, again, I mean, that was like literally 20 minutes of just saying, hey, I've added some resources here that might be helpful for people, ran through what the list was, invited them to email and follow up or ask me after class. And that really helped students who could benefit from some of those supports that were on campus. Another thing that is kind of silly, but has sort of been my way to humanize myself for students is, I'm gonna put this in the chat if it'll work. It's a little screenshot. I don't know if it'll work. We'll see. Did it work? I have on one of my early PowerPoint lecture slides, this slide that says Lori Watts does not equal, and then there's like this gnarly looking monster, right? And so I just literally tell them, like, I'm a human being, I'm a person, I care about you, like, don't be afraid of me. I know often we can be afraid of authority or teachers, and that's not who I am. That's not how I'm gonna interface with you. Come and talk to me when you need me, basically. So, and that's just sort of a visual I've used to communicate that in a different way. Yeah, those are the basics that I had. Oh, and then just a couple of tools for teaching. And I'm pretty sure Teresa, I learned this from you. I loved using Padlet even during Zoom sessions. So when I would put students in breakout rooms, we had a Padlet that I had already loaded with some discussion questions. And in their groups, one scribe typed in what their key points. The thing I loved, and I think about, I think I'll do this in live teaching, is I could see exactly where they were in their discussion, right? If I had 3 or 4 discussions, I could say, oh, group 1's still here. They haven't moved on. Or, oh, they're flying through this faster than I thought. We can probably come back together sooner. And we also had just a good record of a written record of points students were coming up with as they discussed content, and that then could be shared out. So that was a cool tool. I used Mentimeter when I was lecturing, which is, I'm really excited we get to have free iClicker, because I've used that face-to-face, but I've been hesitant to do it because of the student costs. So the fact that that's free now, it just is a survey tool or a quiz tool you can use that students can access from their phone. So I used that to kind of keep things interactive as well. And I too, I think Moji, you talked about this. I felt like recording sessions and making them available and giving students a way to both come back to review or to access the content if they weren't able to be there. That just made good sense to me. I think, I think there's value to showing up and being able to participate and engage that's different than doing it later on your own. But I did, and largely this was just because I knew there were pandemic stressors that some folks couldn't control. I always had a way for students to make up points if they weren't able to participate live in class. So there was a little extra engagement activity or some way for them to let me know that they had read or engaged the content or listened to the class discussion. And if they turned that into me, they got credit for being there just as if they had been there live. So that flexibility was important. All right, I'm done. That's all I got.
Thanks so much, Lori. I love how you describe belonging. We talk so much in higher ed about how much students' sense of belonging to the university matters in terms of their success and whether they graduate, but I feel like something the last year really laid bare is how much it matters to students, how much they feel connected to a specific course. Great. Well, thank you. Wonderful. Just listening to all of you talk, it's so striking, these common threads of finding ways to connect with your students, of being compassionate toward your students, and of being really flexible in your teaching. It's it almost sounds as if sort of the impression I get speaking with all of you is like brick and mortar classrooms are sort of this big set of crutches, and when you knock them all away, you know, it forced some innovation that was hard, but also was really productive in a lot of ways. And it's really inspiring working with all of you and learning from all of you. I think if we can take all this and build a more connected and compassionate and flexible university, that's a pretty wonderful goal. So thank you. So I'm going to open it up to questions from anyone. You can either pop up a hand or put a question in the chat. Either of those things is great. We'll take Tracy's question here as our first, and I'm just going to read this aloud for the benefit of folks watching the video. Question to panelists. Like Lori, I used Padlets during my hybrid class. I didn't figure out how to use it effectively in my asynchronous sections and Nearpod. Anyone else use these or other similar interactive platforms like Pear Deck, Quizzes, Quizlet, Hypothesis, etc.? Did you find effective ways to use them? And that's one of the questions I have for you too. Like, I think a year ago, a lot of us were feeling like, no more tools. Like, I have enough tools. I just want to, you know, explore these and then figure it out. You know, we mentioned, let's see, Padlet came up, a few others. What were some of the tools that really stood out as things that felt solid and like you plan to keep using in some way? Derek.
This might not be very helpful, so I'll keep it brief, but we, because we all recorded things and they all learned how to use digital audio workstation software, as soon as someone recorded something and it was available on our Google Drive, everyone else could download it and throw it into theirs and hear it and play along. And so that was like the mother of interactivity right there. And then in private lessons, for example, there, you know, you would hear each other over Zoom as much as we could, but we would record, and they would record and listen back and reflect. And it seems like such an obvious thing to, like, you know, when you write a paper, reread it first before you submit it, you know, and that's like the same kind of thing in music where, like, if you play something, you should record yourself and listen back. But we've gotten out of doing that. And this is totally maximize that. So that's it for me.
Wonderful. Thanks. Any other thoughts on tools that were especially helpful? Lori.
I was just going to comment on Padlet. I did use it asynchronously also, and that was fun. Like, one of the topics we do in Social Work 101 is child welfare. And I just said, okay, your little I had engagement assignments, you know, just small assignments they had to do to earn, basically, I called it engagement points instead of participation. But I said, put something on the Padlet. It can be an image, it can be a link to a website, just put something there that to you epitomizes child well-being, right? So it was super fun to see it because there were photos and there were websites and there were statistics, right? So students really did a lot of different things, and then they all had access to all of that info, and they did that asynchronously. So yeah, that was a fun way to use Padlet.
A few of you, Lori, Tracy, some others, you mentioned using email as a way to stay connected with your students. And I think that's so important too. Like, some of the shiny new tools were great, but also, you know, some of our most basic tech tools were some of those powerful in staying connected to students. And I've heard that a lot from others too, of getting in that habit of reaching out to students via email is a powerful one that folks plan to keep using. In that vein, yeah.
If I could add something about tools, and this is more related maybe to courses that have computational component and coding. So I used a platform that actually, which is Python based, and the students actually can work simultaneously, can do coding, especially because I feature that teamwork throughout. The students were allowed to work together on assignments. I had teams at the beginning that I defined at the beginning of the semester, and so the students can work as a team, whether it's assignment or quiz. And that platform actually allowed the students to simultaneously work and do the coding and help each other. And not only that, but they could actually invite me to join their project. And actually, I can also help them at the same, they don't need to wait to come during a study session that they had, but I could immediately help them with the coding. They just needed to send me an invitation to join their project. So that was kind of very helpful. And I had happy hour. I just wanted to add, we heard about the connections with students. I had study sessions 2 times a week, but I also had the evening, I call it happy hour, where the students could just come and we just talk. Of course, we can talk about the course, but it was just kind of have time to get to know each other. And I also had incentive for extra credit for the students to come, and it was fun.
Thank you. All right, so we've heard about weekly emails. You mentioned dropping in on students' projects. I love that. I mean, that's both a great way to stay connected and a really efficient use of faculty time, because you're meeting with students in groups instead of individually. Were there other ways people discovered during the pandemic of staying connected to students that you think will become a part of your practice going forward, that were new to you, or new things you tried out? Oh, and the happy hour, Liliana, that's also a wonderful approach that you mentioned. What else?
So I did use Flipgrid quite a bit in my classes. And it can become kind of like with discussion boards where there's fatigue over it if you use it over and over again. So figuring out what's effective, like what's an effective way. And what I did is on some of the choices I offered students, I flipped it like partway through the semester and started saying, you can respond in text or by uploading a picture or by recording a video to this prompt, so that those who hate Flipgrid, and I had one student who was intimidatingly vocal about how much he hated Flipgrid, not intimidating to me, but I felt like to other students. Anyway, so I gave them choice. And then I would do a weekly roundup email. And, I don't know why I've never done something like that before, because it's not like I haven't heard people talk about this, but after I'd had a chance to go through them, I would send an email to the class and spotlight some of the best, well, I would say some of the really interesting or unique responses that people had, sometimes with a link to their video, sometimes just a comment calling out some unique experience they shared. And I wrote down who I spotlighted so that it was different people every time, so that people felt like they were seen. That was actually really small because it meant I didn't have to leave. It was a really big win. It reduced my grading time because I didn't have to leave personal comments on every single person's video, because I was sending to the class and proving that I had seen them all and watched them all, and just kept a little note pad open on the screen so that I would write down the ones that I was like, wow, wow, this is so interesting or heartbreaking or whatever. And these were things that would have been public, to their teams. So I didn't feel like I had to get their permission to share it. I thought that was a way of letting them see all the lived experience we had across the classroom. Because, you feel isolated as a student. You don't know what people are going through, and they may not be in your team. So you didn't get to read their post. And then to find out that, hey, 7 people in the class picked the same article to talk about, because they all were being affected by this particular shortage. Like, I don't know if you guys remember when Peloton was in the news last year because they couldn't ship their exercise bikes and they had not expected such a blow up in demand for home exercise bikes. A bunch of my students were affected by that, either they or their parents or somebody they knew. And they all picked that article to talk about shortages in supply chain. And it was great because they didn't know that they had all picked that article. And it was funny because I saw an uptick in comments on each other's posts the following week in the discussion board. So I felt like it maybe had a positive effect that they see I'm reading it and I care about what they're saying. And so that is a positive way of using discussion boards. I mean, it's not all negative, but if they didn't feel like I read it and cared what they wrote, or they didn't feel like their team members read it and cared what they wrote, then the discussion boards weren't helpful.
Thank you. I feel like you're making another great comment in the same vein of like ways to be connected to your students and have them feel seen by you, but also use your time really efficiently. That doesn't have to mean, half-hour individual conferences with all of your students or something really time intensive. Thank you. A few of you mentioned responding to students having different levels of access to technology. I really felt this keenly too in the last year. It's possible, I think, to make a lot of assumptions. I was definitely over-assuming the level of access that my students have had in the past to basic tools like a laptop, mobile devices. We've touched on this a little bit. I'm curious if there's anyone who had experiences with this but didn't have a chance to talk about it. Are there ways you encountered your students having different levels of access to, technology, but also privacy, just having a quiet room to be able to do a Zoom session, and how you strategized around it?
Hi, yeah, I want to share a point. So, having access is one, and then there are disturbances in life that will impact that access. Like I had a student last year emailing me that, I am under level 2 evacuation right now with fires. So I might not be able to join the class or not be able to, submit my homework on time. So there are access issues to both internet and devices. And there are other phenomena that happens that may limit their access to internet.
I also found that a lot of my students did not have access to a webcam. So what I did was I made it optional for them to turn their video on, or some of them may not feel comfortable turning their video on, even if they have access to one. And the other comment similar to what Moji made was I realized that some of my students were working a lot during the pandemic too. And that was also something I did not expect to happen. So I had to think about flexible ways of making sure they know what's going on in the class, maybe posting videos online or getting in touch with them through emails and so forth. So hopefully that touches on a few things that Dan was asking.
And Derek.
And I had an opposite experience with my students, and that was that once we talked about, the technology requirements for recording music and what you can do with that professionally, and how important that is to careers in music, basically everyone, treated it like a textbook and went out and got the right stuff. And the one student who had a Chromebook, it happened to fall in a fish tank. So it's, so that wasn't an issue because the software only runs on Windows and Mac that we were using. But I think that it was really interesting because of the fact that, when you buy this audio interface and microphone and get it set up in your room, you can also make money teaching private lessons, and the quality of what you're doing goes up. You can also record for people and get paid to do that. That's a large part of my income is recording from my home studio right here. And then simply being a part, I demonstrated, I was like, all right, I've got this nice microphone here, and that gives me an advantage when I'm in a Zoom meeting, and so I think that the students, a lot of them for as little as $200, that you can get what you need to kind of be almost pre-professional as a musician. And so, yeah, so I thought that was really interesting, that I was expecting, yep, there's the Yeti right there. And I was expecting it to be a huge issue. And I was expecting students to want to spend $15 on a USB microphone from whatever Radio Shack is now. And but it was really, they kind of all understood the rationale behind it and said, okay, let's do this.
That's great. Thank you. There's just a couple minutes left. I wonder if I could just get a couple of really quick responses. Are there any ways that you feel like you became a better teacher during the pandemic?
I will say that I am a very rule-bound person. I mean, I teach process improvement. I teach process control. I teach statistics. I'm very comfortable with rules, and I feel as though I got better at compassionate and practical compassion. Not assuming that a student is trying to game the system if they reach out to me after something is due and ask for help. But I also relearned the importance of the spin of your message. So I have always had buffer in my schedule, in my classes. I've always had anywhere from 2 to 5% of extra credit or buffer always built into my classes so that students can afford to miss things. And I just kept harping on, this puts you in the driver's seat. This is allowing you to make choices. This is why I don't accept late assignments, because you have the choice to prioritize something going on in your life. It is only intended for a one-day issue that you're having. If you have a multi-day issue, you need to get in touch so we can work together. And just changing that messaging. I didn't have any complaints on my evals. It's for the first time ever, I didn't have any complaints on my evals from students who said, she doesn't understand what I'm going through, or, she, is too rigid. I mean, those were always the minority, but I didn't have any. So I guess that spin and an attitude of compassion first. I still didn't accept late assignments. But it's just the way that I spun the message to them, I guess.
Yeah. That's a wonderful thought to close on. Panelists, thank you so much. You're all inspiring colleagues, and I'm really thrilled to be doing this good work with you here at Boise State. All of you who joined us for your lunch hour, thank you for taking the time to be here. Wonderful spending this time with all of you. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day.